Sup, guys? It's Toad back with you again. Coming off a nice bounce back day. I've had 3 winning days out of the last 4. I know the day before that, Sunday, was terrible, but yesterday was a nice return to form. 6-3 day yesterday, and all 3 losses weren't even that ridiculous. I mean, they're all kind of close. Mercer started off the day. That was my afternoon play. They were getting blown out of the building, and I'm like, yeah, this is a great start to the day. And they made an epic comeback, came all the way back and won outright as an underdog in overtime. So that was an outright underdog money line win. Norfolk State later in the night had an outright underdog win easily. East Texas A&M covered the spread but did not win outright, somehow losing by 2 to Stonehill. And I mentioned I found +3s out there, but the +2.5 covered too. So I wound up going 3-2 in college basketball. Virginia Tech was within like 1.5 points, I think, of covering on that number. So that was close to being a cover. And the other one was North Texas, who won outright but did not cover the spread. That line actually dropped like a point or so, so I didn't love seeing that, but whatever. And then NBA, I lost on the Indiana Pacers. I mean, they were winning most of the game. They did win. That was another win and non-cover. So kind of rare to get wins and non-covers. I mean, obviously it happens, but it doesn't happen that often, especially with spreads that are kind of in that range where you don't need to win by that much, below the 7 in basketball. So whatever. And then hockey, man, I feel like I'm unstoppable in hockey. I think I'm 22-12 on the season, but I'm on like a 20-9 run. I'm on a 6-1 run right now. 3-0 in hockey yesterday. Tampa Bay won 8-2. The over that I had hit. There was an empty net in that one too, because it would have pushed otherwise. But still, there were a ton of shots in that game, especially from the New Jersey side. I think they had like 40-something shots in the game, 45, 46, whatever it was. New Jersey played like a bunch of frenzied lunatics in that game, it looks like. I don't know. I didn't see it, though. And then the St. Louis Blues fired coach phenomenon, baby. Jim Montgomery, I don't even know if he coached the game or not, but they beat the New York Rangers on the road 5-2. Man, I feel like I can't even get a hockey play wrong. So you know what I'm going to do today? Not play either of the hockey games today. That's what I'm going to do. I got 4 plays, 2 college basketball, 2 NBA. What's up, Nate? Kucherov for 2 points. Yeah. Tampa Bay, they went completely insane, dude. Their offense is crazy. Let's get into today's slate here, man. Like I said, college basketball, NBA. I will talk about NHL briefly, I guess, and college football. We have 2 very uninteresting MAC games. There might be a little bit of one tidbit that's interesting in one of the 2 games, kind of, but there's no way I'm going to touch those games. College basketball, I'm also going to be super selective here. And again, we have these early season tournaments going on that are continuing, and we got Chicago State again playing at 10:30 in the morning in Daytona Beach. So that's coming up in a half hour. Good luck for the degenerates who are putting money on that game. I would if I saw like a situation that I liked, but I do not. And then some games coming up at 11. I will point out, by the way, this one is actually interesting to me. I'm not playing it, but Duquesne and Old Dominion playing in this Cayman Islands tournament here. Duquesne, they're off to an 0-6 start. Okay, so yeah, that looks bad. 0-6. Everybody remembers, well, maybe people remember, Duquesne made the tournament last year, and they got their first tournament win in like multiple decades, upsetting BYU in the tournament. So Duquesne had a nice season last year. They're expected to do okay this year, I think, too. They're off to an 0-6 start, but they really haven't faced the easiest schedule. I mean, Princeton, and they only lost that game by 7. That's not easy. I mean, DePaul actually doesn't look that bad this year. That's a Big East team anyway. Milwaukee's decent in the horizon. That was a close loss. South Dakota State's pretty good. Lipscomb isn't that bad either. So these losses aren't really that bad, and that was a close one too. For Duquesne, these losses aren't really that bad, except they're coming off maybe their ugliest loss here against Hampton, who's a MEAC team. Duquesne was a 6.5-point favorite in that one and didn't win that game. And neither team even really shot well in this game. I just don't know how to explain it. But because Duquesne is off of such an ugly loss, I would actually lean to Duquesne in this game against Old Dominion. I mean, Old Dominion's faced a difficult schedule too. to some extent Arizona, but man, they got absolutely annihilated by Arizona. They got annihilated by BC. And now they're coming off. I'm almost tempted to play this now that I'm diving even deeper into this. Old Dominion, they're coming off a tough game against High Point where they were 14.5-point underdogs, and Old Dominion was hanging in this game, man. They were winning the game for a majority of the game for almost the entire first half, into the second half, deeper into the game, into the final 10 minutes. Still, they had the lead with 7 minutes left, and then they kind of just like faded a little bit, and they're still trying to hang in the game near the end, still within like 2 scores in the final couple minutes. So Old Dominion, I mean, they hung around with High Point, man, in a game where they were a big-time underdog. And now we're going to look at this game between Old Dominion and Duquesne, and look at this line here, man. Duquesne is laying 7.5 points, and they're 0-6. People are going to look at this and think, how is Duquesne laying 7.5 points against an Old Dominion team who's 2-5? Duquesne doesn't even have a win. So I think the public is going to think like this looks way too easy to take Old Dominion, right? If they're being degenerates and they're out in Vegas right now. Duquesne is actually down from 7.5 to 7, though, with 53% of the tickets on them and 54% of the cash on the Old Dominion side. Now it just flips, and now we have cash percentage on Duquesne. Am I going to add this one in? I kind of like this spot, man, because Duquesne is coming off probably their ugliest loss of the season. I think they're being a bit undervalued here. And Old Dominion, like I said, they're probably being a little bit overvalued here, and they're coming off their biggest performance of the year where they fell short as a huge underdog. It does make me want to lay the points with Duquesne, man. It looks so difficult to do. And I think this is going to be probably like a, I don't know if I want to look at how this is going to be a pacing discrepancy or whatever. Actually, yeah, let me bring it up. Let me see what I can see with KenPom here as far as this being a pacing mismatch here. Duquesne, they're one of the unluckiest teams in KenPom's luck rankings, 325, very unlucky. They're ranked 242nd in the country, 238 in tempo, so they play pretty slow. Old Dominion plays around the same. Oh, no, Old Dominion, yeah, a little bit faster at 160. They're 264 in luck index, so also kind of low in the luck index, 325th overall. So KenPom really has Old Dominion as a pretty bad team. Man, and Old Dominion, yeah, he has them really bad, especially defensively. And Old Dominion, I'm looking at their schedule right now. I mean, their only wins are against Maryland Eastern Shore by 2 points, and they're ranked in the bottom, like 7 in all of Division I basketball. And then Randolph-Macon, probably some, they must be in Macon, Georgia, I guess, some non-Division I team. Not impressive at all for Old Dominion there. Man, Duquesne, I mean, Duquesne's actually faced the more difficult schedule, as I mentioned. Like, they're facing a bunch of fairly competitive mid-majors there, even though they've not faced anybody in the top 100. Old Dominion has not faced anybody in the top, well, they've only faced Arizona as far as top 100. But every team they face, yeah, in the top, like, 150, they've gotten blown out except High Point. Man. This one's tough. I think I want to do it, though. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna throw it in there, right in there at 11 a.m., man. Duquesne, -7.5. I hate myself. Let's do it. Duquesne, -7.5. I'm gonna play it. Oh, my God. Kill me. All right, so that one's gonna be a play. Let's move on to some of these other games I was gonna talk about here. Oh, my God. Why am I doing this to myself? All right. There weren't really that many other, like, totally interesting games. I mean, Creighton, San Diego State's interesting because I'm not going to play this. So Creighton just came off their first loss, losing to Nebraska, kind of inexplicably. I think this was in Omaha, yeah, at Creighton. Nebraska stepped it up, man, because Creighton's been, like, their bigger brother in the state of Nebraska for a while. Creighton was a 9.5-point favorite in this one, and Nebraska won this game pretty much wire to wire. They just really annihilated Creighton in this game, I would say. Both teams shot quite poorly in this game, especially Creighton. Creighton had a ton of turnovers in this game, too, so Creighton played a really bad game. So on the one hand, you think, well, Creighton's going to bounce back here probably off of that, but I don't know, man, because that Nebraska rivalry is a big game. That was their first loss. Could hang them over a little bit. Creighton, I don't think they're a bad team, but, man, they have beaten up on some bad teams prior to running into Nebraska there. And up next tomorrow, they get ranked Texas A&M. And then after a break, they get Kansas. So it is possible they are hung over and they look past San Diego State, man. San Diego State, they're coming off a big game, too, against Gonzaga. They lost pretty badly in that game against Gonzaga, and I think that was a while ago. So I think San Diego State has more time off. Yeah, they have a ton of rest here. They've only played 3 games, only 2 against D1, so I don't know what we can expect out of San Diego State either, but I guess that would be the way I would lean slightly, is to the San Diego State side. Creighton is only laying 4 points, so that also looks weird. Like, oh, we get a ranked Creighton team against the San Diego State team that kind of lost a bunch of their guys from those tournament teams the last couple of years. Creighton's public, 83% of the tickets, although 92% of the cash also on them. This is in the Players Era tournament, which is at the MGM in Las Vegas, so no real, well, I don't want to say there's no real home advantage here either, because San Diego State, this game's going to be where they're used to playing, the Pacific time zone, and Creighton is having to go out from the Midwest into the Pacific time zone. So Creighton's having to switch time zones. They just played more recently in a tough game. San Diego State at least has more rest. I don't think it's going to be rust when they went into having that rest on a losing note. And San Diego State, they're going to be playing way closer to home because they're playing in Las Vegas here. So, yeah, I mean, I lean to San Diego State plus the points for those reasons. I'm not going to do it, but that would be the way I would look in that one. What else we got going on here? I mean, UConn, Colorado. UConn ranked number 2 in the country. We all know, and this is something I'm going to talk about Memphis coming up in a little while. UConn had beaten up on a bunch of really bad teams to start the season, and they finally ran into some adversity playing a team that's actually good for once, and UConn lost the game. I don't know if we know how good this UConn team is this year, man. I don't expect them to three-peat here. I mean, they're not a bad team. They're one of the top teams still, but I don't know if they're really the number 1 team. That's the type of loss. You suffer your first loss, man. You're a program like UConn. You're not used to that. You could be hung over from that coming into this next game. Colorado, I mean, they're coming off a somewhat difficult game, too, where they actually lost their first game of the season as well. They'd played some fairly easy opponents, too, although somewhat more difficult than UConn, I would say. Colorado almost lost to Northern Colorado, but Northern Colorado always steps it up, facing the big brothers. Colorado is significantly worse than UConn, though, I will say. Colorado is probably down this year. I don't think they're very good. Colorado coming off their first loss as well to Michigan State. So is that going to be a momentum stopper that hangs them over? I don't know. Both of these teams lost these games yesterday, so I don't know. This one's a tough read. I'm not getting involved in this one, but let me see here. Colorado, where are we at? UConn's up from 13 to 15 as a huge favorite. 95% of the tickets, 98% of the cash on UConn. So this one is kind of a difficult read for me here. I don't know what I want to say about this otherwise, but I'm not going to play this game, obviously. Oh, boy. I'm starting to get lightheaded a little bit here. Hang on, man. Let me get my bearings here a little bit. This is crazy. I don't know if it's just from my screen here or what it is, but, man, whew. It's because I'm out of breath because I keep talking. All right. Do I want to talk about some of these other big games? Clemson, Penn State? I don't know. Maybe. I usually hit more games than I actually want to talk about. Clemson, I thought they might get caught because the San Francisco team is actually not bad, but Clemson did well in the game. They beat San Francisco easily, and they're still rolling along here. Their only losses to Boise. They get Penn State. Now, Penn State's undefeated, and this is in the Sunshine Championship. I don't know what this is, but Penn State's faced a little bit of an easier schedule. I mean, Clemson, their losses to Boise. Boise is pretty good, surprisingly good. Yeah, this is in the Sunshine Slam in Daytona Beach. This is the championship game in the tournament. So at this point, I think both of these teams are going to show up for this game. I mean, you got Big Ten against ACC, 2 teams with good records. I expect both teams to show up here. I don't think there's that much else to say about this other than the fact that Clemson, I would say, is the better of these 2 teams. Clemson, they're up from, they flipped from a +1 dog to a 2-point favorite, 79% of the tickets, 80% of the cash on them. So they are public, but they do have the money coming in on them. And I would agree that Clemson is the better team here. So that, and they're the 1-loss team. So maybe the records are a little bit misleading there. So I agree with the Clemson side slightly. Because I think they're the slightly better team. So that's the way I would look there if I was going to play that game, which I'm not. Oregon is playing number 20 Texas A&M. This one's interesting, dude. Texas A&M, I thought they could be in a little bit of a letdown spot after a big win, like their biggest game of the season so far against Ohio State. They won, although Ohio State's been knocked from the rankings, but I still think Ohio State's pretty good. Texas A&M, I mean, they still won against Southern. They didn't cover, though. So Southern did cover that one. Texas A&M in the letdown spot. And Southern was actually beating them by double digits for like more than half of the game. And Texas A&M, I guess, decided, probably we should turn it on and not lose this game, guys. So Texas A&M is actually kind of coming off a scare here, and now they get Oregon, and they got Creighton up next tomorrow, which is a ranked opponent. But are they going to overlook Oregon? I'm not so sure. When you had a game like that against Southern where you were losing for more than half of it against a very inferior opponent, and you're in a letdown spot like that, I think you're probably going to bring more focus into the next game because you don't want that to happen again. So I would expect Texas A&M to show up here. This is also in the Players Era tournament out in Las Vegas. Oregon's coming off a rivalry game against Oregon State, so that is a bigger game to be coming off of. That is a big win, even though Oregon was expected to win the game. As I mentioned yesterday, it was a bigger game for Oregon State, and they gave like an all-out effort there, and they wound up blowing the game near the end. So Oregon was a favorite in this one, and they were losing for the entire game too. So they are likely going to be focused in this game against Texas A&M as well. So I'm not going to play this game. Texas A&M's up from 3 to 3.5. 72% of the tickets, 80% of the cash on them. I would agree with where the market is indicating in that one with the Texas A&M side, but not strong in any way at all. I mean, I just think, yeah, they're the slightly better team, and maybe they have a little bit more reason to be focused here than Oregon does, just because Texas A&M is coming off an uglier performance in a way where Oregon is at least coming off a rivalry game where even though they were favored and they were losing for most of that game where they shouldn't have been losing, it's still a bigger game for Oregon at the very least. So that's the way that I kind of look at that one. Next up, we got one of my plays coming in. What's up, Nate? Excited about what games? When I was talking about the MAC football games, you mean, or these college basketball games, I do get excited, man. Next up is one of my plays, and I'm going to play Michigan State on I found the money line at minus 111 here rather than laying 1.5 here. If you want to lay 1 or 1.5, go ahead and do it. I mean, I don't think it's going to matter. It shouldn't, but I saw the money line at almost a minus 110 price at, I forget where it was, Caesars or MGM maybe, in Mass, whichever one it was. I don't even remember, but I was like, yeah, that's like almost just straight up pick 'em money line. Give me it at minus 111, but I agree with laying 1.5 with Michigan State as well. Either way, I would play Michigan State in this one. We're already into the evening games here, so we're going to try to go quickly like I did yesterday. I went a little bit more quickly yesterday. I mean, this is classic. You know exactly what I'm going to say, right? Memphis, they face I don't want to say an easy schedule. I mean, Missouri, UNLV, Ohio's not even that bad. San Francisco's pretty good too. So actually, they face a fairly difficult schedule. But what did they do yesterday? Yeah, they beat UConn in overtime, man. They beat the returning champs, the number 2 ranked team in the nation, as an 8.5-point underdog. Memphis beat UConn, and it was a max effort game. Memphis was winning late in the game. They had a huge lead, and UConn came all the way back, sent it into overtime, and Memphis still did not let UConn continue to have that momentum there, and Memphis was able to still get the win out of there. Memphis also shot ridiculously, man. They're not going to be able to keep this up. 54.7% from the field and 54.5% from 3. That's ridiculous. That's not going to happen again. As far as the threes, I don't know how many threes they actually had. They were 12 for 22, it looks like. So, yeah, I don't expect that to happen again. Tyrese Hunter, 7 for 10 from 3. Yeah, I think Memphis is going to be in a big letdown spot off of that. I mean, that was a monster win. And now I know it is another big opponent against Michigan State, but Michigan State just really tends to fly under the radar a lot. This is out in Maui, by the way. These teams are playing out in Hawaii. So take from that what you will there. Memphis, I'm assuming the UConn game was also out there, right? Because they're not going to be, yeah, that was also in Maui. Because they're not just going to be like moving around like this. Michigan State, yeah, I'm going to jump on the Michigan State side in this one. Michigan State, They also played in the Maui tournament yesterday, and like I said, they had an easier go of it, beating Colorado. I mean, that is what it is. That was at 5:45 p.m., so does that mean the Memphis game was actually later, too? Because that would make this even better if Memphis played later. They did not. They played at 2:30 p.m., so Michigan State did play in the later game, but I still like this one because this is a much easier game for Michigan State. I mean, they had a handle on this game. Colorado's not a good team, even though the record looks good. Michigan State won easily in this game. And Michigan State, actually, they should have won this game by even more of a blowout. I mean, they dominated the boards. They only shot 9.5% from three. So that's going to have to progress back to a mean, too. I mean, no team shoots that low from three on a night-to-night basis consistently. So Michigan State, they weren't even shooting well at all in this game, and they still won easy. So, yeah, I mean, those the way those games played out, Michigan State actually looked worse than they actually were in that game, and Memphis looked probably a little bit better than they actually are. Memphis, I mean, that was just such a monumental upset. That's like the legitimizer game of the year. We talk about the legitimizer more so in football because it's a shorter season. When you get that first massive win of the season that legitimizes you in the eyes of the public, like, holy shit, Memphis just beat UConn. This team is for real this year. Yeah, that's when you have the letdown come in. Give me Michigan State in this game, whichever way you want to play it, laying like 1 or 1.5 or playing the money line. Either way, I like it. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I got so stoked or stroked. I don't know. Maybe I'm stroking out. Because of my strokes, I have seizure issues, though, so I hope that's not what it was. I took my meds this morning, but, like, sometimes because I have permanent brain damage from the stroke, sometimes the seizures can come back, because when I first had it, I didn't even know I had a stroke until it triggered a seizure, and I went into the hospital for that, and that's when they diagnosed the stroke. The stroke caused a seizure. Then I eventually went off the seizure meds like a couple years later because they thought that the seizure was a one-time thing triggered by the stroke, but apparently the stroke caused permanent brain damage, and I had another seizure, so I can't go off the seizure meds, so that sucks. So I don't have epilepsy. It's not triggered by like flashing lights or whatever, but it is just randomly triggered by permanent brain damage. So that's awesome. And by the way, in Massachusetts, at least, when you have a stroke, you're not allowed to drive for 6 months. Your license is revoked for 6 months, basically, or rendered inactive, basically. So that's also awesome. All right, let's talk about some more college basketball. I have one more college basketball play. What else do I want to talk about? Did I want to talk about any of these other games? I don't know. There are a few other big games. Interestingly, just tidbit, Florida State versus Western Carolina looked like it wasn't even on the board. It looked like there were no odds in that one, so I don't know. And that's at Florida State. Obviously, Florida State would be a pretty big favorite, but, I mean, that's not something that's going to keep the game off the board. I mean, there was some game on the board. I forget which game it was. One of these games, there's like a 40-something point favorite in the game. So, I mean, it's not like that's going to keep odds makers from putting a line out on some of these games. So I don't really get, like, this line probably wouldn't be as high as that one. So I don't know why that game is off the board in the Florida State game, but just a little bit of an interesting side note there in that game. What else we got here? I'm skipping ahead a little bit here. I didn't want to talk about any of these games here. These games were all uninteresting. Well, Grand Canyon and Stanford, I mean, this is one, I keep harping on Grand Canyon, even though they've had some bad performances, but I still think they're better than they look. Stanford really hasn't faced anybody good so far. I mean, their biggest game was this game against Santa Clara, stepping it up. And Grand Canyon is a pretty decent team. Stanford is actually not that good. So the fact that Grand Canyon's flipped from a 1-point dog to a 1.5-point favorite with juice, again, the market is speaking here and telling you that Grand Canyon, even though they're like a 500 team or whatever right now, and they're in the WAC, they're actually better than this now ACC Stanford team. Even though Stanford is undefeated, Grand Canyon's faced the more difficult schedule. Grand Canyon is the better team. The odds makers are telling you that, not by much, but by a little bit. 67% of the tickets, 79% of the cash on Grand Canyon, or really I would say the market is telling you that. Because the odds makers, I think, probably figured they had to skew the number when they opened it towards Stanford a little bit because their record is way better. But in comes the money on the Grand Canyon side, it looks like. So I wouldn't disagree with the Grand Canyon side in that one. I mean, situationally, I don't see a whole lot going on here. Grand Canyon's 3-2, actually, not 3-3. But other than that, I mean, this is a game where neither team really has like a situational edge, I wouldn't say necessarily. So I would just look to the team that looks like they're not the better team, but actually are slightly in Grand Canyon. What else is going on here? Houston and Alabama. I mean, this is one of the biggest games, probably the second biggest game. Or maybe it's the biggest. I mean, Kansas-Duke, one of these two games is the biggest of the day. This one is in that Las Vegas tournament as well. Houston, number 6 against Alabama, number 9. I actually think both of these teams may be a little bit underrated here. Now, Ken Bum has Houston as the number 1 team, and I think he has Alabama. Where does he have them at? He's got Alabama actually at 10, so they're not being overranked. They're not being underranked, I should say. They're being slightly overranked. Houston is being underranked, though, because they have that loss to Auburn. And yeah, they haven't played anybody else, but these other nobodies that they've played, they've wrecked all of them. And Hofstra is not even that bad. I'm not sure Louisiana's that bad either, even though their record is bad right now. But, I mean, Houston is just wrecking everybody. And losing to Auburn isn't even that bad. Auburn was ranked 11, but Auburn is a top 5 team in the country, in my estimation, and based on Ken Palm's rankings. Ken Palm's got Auburn at number 3 right now. Houston, Gonzaga, and then Auburn right now. So Houston, they are still a top team in the nation, man, and they have a much better defense. This is going to be an interesting game. I mean, both of these teams are obviously going to show up for this game, and it's going to come down to which team can control the pace in this game, because Houston, they can grind you, man. They are grinders. They have one of the slowest paces in the country, as they usually do. They play really good defense. That's what Houston does, and Alabama is the opposite. Alabama doesn't play that good of defense, and they want to run the ball. Their defense looks like it's a little bit better this year, but they're definitely a more offensive-oriented team, and they want to play fast. So when you get into a situation like that, it's usually easier to slow the tempo of the game, and Houston is a slightly better team as well. So I think the pacing contrast, probably Houston will be able to win out in that regard. Alabama, I mean, they're coming off a couple big games in a row, so they've actually faced a more difficult recent schedule, but that means they're coming off of bigger games against Purdue and Illinois, whereas Houston has had a much lighter recent schedule. So Houston is actually the team that probably has like a little bit of a rest advantage here because of that, because Alabama is having to play step-up game after step-up game like this. And a game against Illinois, that's going to be a game where teams are running up and down the court, man. 2 fast-paced teams. So coming out of that, and the fact that I think Houston is actually being underranked here, I would look to the Houston side in this one. Houston's up from 3 to 4, 62% of the tickets, 87% of the cash. So it looks like the money is coming in on the Houston side. And like I said, yeah, I agree with that. I would look to the Houston side in that one if I was going to play that game. What else? Did I skip over? I was going to talk about the Rutgers game, but I don't know where it is. Is it later in the night? Yeah, it's way down there. Man, there are a lot of night games tonight, man. Iowa State, Dayton. I mean, this one's interesting, too, because both of these teams are coming off big games where they fell just short. And not only did they fall just short, but in both of these games, Iowa State against Auburn yesterday, Iowa State was running Auburn out of the building, man. I mean, Iowa State was dominating that game. Then they wound up falling apart and losing the game. And then they get this game against Dayton here, and they have Marquette up next, although they have a break after this. So Iowa State, I think they're in a pretty bad spot here. I mean, there's no way else to look at it. This is a bad spot for them, coming off a game where they had Auburn pretty much dead in this game. That was going to be a huge win for Iowa State, and that could have been a matchup potentially in the East Regional, one of the games that I was at last year. But Auburn couldn't make it past the first round in the tournament last year, so that was not to be, although I saw Iowa State play against Illinois last year live in the tournament. But Iowa State, yeah, that could have been a monumental win for them over Auburn, man. Huge game, 5 versus 4. They had Auburn completely blown out of the game, and they wound up losing the game in the end. Look at that. Iowa State was way ahead, and they completely imploded. They were still hanging on to the lead, and then wound up blowing it. How do you get back up off the mat after that, especially when you also have this big game up against Marquette next, although it's not for over a week, but still. However, they're playing Dayton, and what did Dayton do yesterday? Oh, yeah, Dayton was an even bigger underdog of 9.5, because I think Iowa State was only like a 4.5-point underdog against Auburn. Dayton was a 9.5-point underdog, and They were blowing North Carolina out of the building. Look at this. They were winning this game by like almost 20 here, or maybe even more than 20 at some point in this game. Dayton was, yeah, I mean, they were blowing North Carolina out of the building. However, Dayton likes to play slow, so this game was definitely at North Carolina's pace. It was a fast tempo game. North Carolina, they came all the way back after Dayton was winning the whole game. Dayton didn't even lose the lead until the final, like, couple minutes of the game when North Carolina finally took over the lead and won the game right at the end. That is a brutal way for Dayton to lose. Probably more brutal than Iowa State's loss, because that would have been a bigger upset. But Dayton doesn't have anything up next, so how do you possibly handicap this game? Well, you don't, basically. I mean, yeah, you do, but, I mean, so this is one of the games in Maui as well. Iowa State's up from 6 to 8.5, 50% of tickets and cash, both evenly split. But rather than try to do anything with the side here, I mean, yes, we know Iowa State is the better of these two teams. Both teams are in horrible spots, so rather than try to figure out what's going to go on with the side here, I would recommend that if you want to play this game, I would look to go over. Oh, God, Dayton's 666 on the board, too, on the betting sheet here. Their number is 666, the ticket number there, whatever you want to call it. I forget what they call the number there, but that's the number when you go up to the window and you want to play 666, baby. I want Satan. Oh, Dayton rhymes with Satan, too. What is going on here, man? Everything is a simulation. You get the Satan Flyers today. But the way I would look to play this game is the over. It's up from 140 to 142.5. So it looks like some money has come in on the over. And that's just because both of these teams played last night. So their defenses are going to be gassed after those games last night. They were both pretty high-scoring games. So that is the one issue, though, that both of those games are so high-scoring that the public might come in and think, well, obviously this game is going to be high-scoring as well. But in this case, I just think they're right. And this total is a little bit low. So, I mean, because both of these teams, the problem I have with it is that Iowa State does focus on defense first. They are a more defensive team. And Dayton also tries to slow the pace of the game. So that's the issue I have with really wanting to play the over here. But these defenses could really be gassed. So that is still the way that I would look to play that game, though. Would be to the over. Kansas Duke. Yeah, this is where my other play is. And I'm going to play Duke. I'm going to lay Duke, minus 3.5 here. I think we're getting out of control here, man. Kansas is ranked number 1 in the country, and Duke is down to number 11 just because they have one loss. I think, look over at KenPom. KenPom has Duke ranked number 4 in the country and with the number 1 ranked defense in the country right now. So Houston is actually 2 in defense and not 1. So KenPom has Duke up there, and he has Kansas down at number 9. And just in the teens in both defense and offense. This is also going to be another pacing collision, man, where Duke plays real slow at not real slow, but quite slow at 220th in tempo, according to KenPom. And Kansas is in the top 100 at 91. So not as ridiculous as the Houston tempo discrepancy between them and Alabama, which is 349 against 9. But this is still a game where Duke's going to try to slow down the game. And I think, like I said, it's easier for the team to slow down the game than it is for a team to speed up the game. And in a game like this where Duke, I believe, is the slightly better team, that is the way that you want to look in this game. And the odds makers are telling you Duke is the better team. Like, how is the number 11 ranked team laying 3.5 in a neutral? This is in Terry's Chocolate Vegas showdown. Does the winning coach get fudge dumped on them or something in this game? Terry's Chocolate. That just sounds real bad, man. Terry's Chocolate. It sounds a little bit more dangerous. It's a good thing this game's not being played in Cleveland. This is out in Las Vegas, so it's a neutral site game. And how is the number 11 ranked team laying points against the number 1 team in the country? Well, obviously, the odds makers are telling you those rankings are not accurate. So, for that reason, give me Duke, because I think the rankings are inaccurate. Yeah, Kansas has had some decent wins. North Carolina, Michigan State, those are pretty good. They're coming off an easy win over NC Wilmington. All right, fine. Kansas has been playing well, yeah, for sure, but they've also been off for a week now. So, and now they have to travel out to Las Vegas. So how is Kansas gonna react to this? Is that too much time off? Because when you're rolling like this, you don't really want to have that much time off. It kind of functions like a bye, even though, yeah, they're going to be focused on this game, but that might hurt their momentum a little bit, man. When you're running like this and you're rolling, you don't want to have time off like that. Meanwhile, Duke, I think it's a better situation for Duke because at the very least they're used to losing because they lost to Kentucky. So they have one loss. You get that loss out of the way. Now you don't really have to think about that anymore. Whereas Kansas, they're undefeated. They're number one in the country. Kansas really has that target on their back right now, man. Whereas Duke, they're not going to have that target on their back anymore because of that one loss to a pretty good Kentucky team. Duke has dropped too far in the rankings because of that. The rankings always overreact to it. And yes, I know Duke is coming off a bigger game where they beat Arizona, but that was a game that put them basically in the same time zone they're going to be in here, man. So I'm hoping that Duke did not go back home between these two guys because Duke, they played more recently, so their momentum should still be there because they have not had a week off. They played that game, even though, it was a big game against Arizona. It was a big win, but Duke won this game easily, and I lost money on this one. I mean, both teams actually shot pretty poorly in this game. Duke actually dominated the boards against an Arizona team that has size. Arizona is usually pretty good on the boards, and Duke still out-rebounded them. This Duke team is definitely dangerous, man, and I still think they're being overlooked. Who would think that you'd be actually getting value on Duke, one of the biggest name in college basketball, basically? But I think in this situation you are, and like I said, they're already out in Arizona, so not much travel from Arizona to Vegas. And my thinking is that they probably figured, hey, we're in Arizona. Our game up next is against Vegas. Let's just stay out here, which I hope is what they did because that would give them more of an edge here. Give me Duke in this game. Kansas does look like they have 59% of tickets and 69% of the cash. And the lines moved down from 4.5 to 3 on Duke here. Ken Bum has Duke winning this game by 5, by the way. So closer to where the odds makers opened. And not that Ken Bum's rankings are everything. They're just numbers. But still, I don't like that the money seems to be coming in on the Kansas side right now. I think Duke is definitely being underrated. It's one of those situations where the odds makers disagree with the rankings. And I'm going to agree with the odds makers when that happens. I like Duke. Lay me the points with Duke. I always say give me, but when you want something given to you, that means you're being given points. I don't know. Just the way that it's phrased, I don't know. Some bettors don't like if you phrase it that way. I just don't really give a shit. Whatever. I'm gonna grab Duke here at -3.5. I will grab them, man. In an aggressive manner. It's hot. I'm going to grab the dudes from Duke, repay them for that lacrosse team scandal, man, which didn't actually happen, by the way. Duke -3.5 will be that play there, although it actually looks like it's down to 3 at this point, so probably getting a better number on Duke now, so I'll have to see what the best number I can get is. I haven't played that one yet, so I'll have to look at that. And then before I get out of here, Rutgers and Notre Dame, or before I switch over to the other sports, oh my God. Rutgers, these teams are both in a similar spot, man. And Rutgers, they just suffered their first loss of the season, and they were not beating good teams, man. This Rutgers team, they were ranked in the top 25, and I think that was a complete joke. I mean, Rutgers, according to Ken Pom, they're 75th in the country. They faced the 328th toughest schedule, so they have not faced a difficult schedule at all, as you can see here. And they lost in their first road game. I mentioned this on my show I think it was yesterday, right, or the day before that. I said Kennesaw plus the points was probably the way to look in this game. Rutgers, way overrated. First road game, and Kennesaw pulled out the 11.5-point upset in this game. Big win for Kennesaw, so probably going to be looking to fade Kennesaw in their next game, which doesn't come up for another couple of days, though, so they have a couple extra days. But they're probably going to be thinking about that win. Rutgers, like I said, they're overrated, but the public is still going to probably overvalue Rutgers. Rutgers, coming off that first loss, it can definitely hang you over, man. You might not be feeling too great about it, and they have Alabama up tomorrow, and that is a bigger game. So does that mean they're going to overlook Notre Dame? They might very well overlook Notre Dame here, man. I mean, this is not football. So Notre Dame, I mean, they're decent. I mean, they're 4-1, but they're not the football Notre Dame at the very least. And Notre Dame, they've played a pretty easy schedule too, although Georgetown is not that horrible right now, even though they've been one of the worst Big East teams, but they're not a total pushover. What did Notre Dame do in their last game? They lost to Elon. Elon Musk beat Notre Dame single-handedly. No, I don't know how this happened, although, I mean, Elon has been one of the worst teams in the Colonial, basically since they moved up to Division I. Maybe they're not that bad this year. I don't know, but they were a 15.5-point underdog, and Notre Dame lost this game, and Elon shot ridiculously, 57.1% from the field and 46.7% from three. That is not going to happen again. They somehow out-rebounded Notre Dame. I mean, yeah, maybe this Elon team is a team to watch out for, but still, that is an ugly loss. That's worse than the Kennesaw loss for Rutgers there. Notre Dame, I think they're going to be the more embarrassed team, and yes, they do have a big game up next as well in 2 days against Houston. So are they going to overlook Rutgers? Maybe not, because I don't know, man. This is ACC against Big Ten. Rutgers did just fall out of the rankings. I don't know, but the odds makers have Rutgers actually up from pick'em to 2. 60% of the tickets and 76% of the cash on Notre Dame, though. So Notre Dame actually has the cash percentage in this one. This one's a difficult read, man. I mean, both of these teams are in bounce-back spots. Like I said, Rutgers, according to KenPom, is ranked in the 70s, and he's got Notre Dame at 70. So he has Notre Dame actually ahead of Rutgers by 5 ranking points. So he has Notre Dame as the better team and winning this game by 1 on a neutral, whereas the odds makers, now the line has moved all the way to Rutgers -2. So I would look to take the points with Notre Dame, though. I think the spot is better from Notre Dame. I think they're the more embarrassed team here. Rutgers just falling out of the rankings. I think they're in a spot that would tend to be more of a hangover spot, in my opinion, even though that was also kind of an ugly loss there. Notre Dame is actually facing an even weaker schedule, though, 333rd in strength of schedule to the 328 that we got going on the Rutgers side. Very weird game, kind of an interesting game, man. So that's how I look at that. And then last game I'll talk about here, Auburn against North Carolina. This is number 4 against number 12. According to KenPom, Auburn is basically appropriately ranked. They're number 3, according to him, and North Carolina is 12, according to KenPom. So this is almost accurate, man. North Carolina, they're a very up-tempo, 6th in tempo in the nation, whereas Auburn plays slower at 135. He's got Auburn 2nd in offense and 9th in defense. North Carolina 5th in offense, but 53rd in defense. So the big difference here is that Auburn plays defense and Notre Dame does not. North Carolina does not. And remember, both of these teams are coming off ridiculous comeback efforts. Auburn's coming off a comeback against Iowa State, though, which is the number 5 ranked team in the country, though. So that would give me a little bit of pause on the Auburn side here, because that is a bigger win. I mean, Auburn was a bit of a smaller favorite in that game, and they were getting blown out of the building, and they came all the way back. And I think that's more considered to be kind of like almost an even matchup, and that was a big win for Auburn. And they do have Duke up next. Not that you're going to overlook North Carolina. And this is out in Maui as well, by the way, if you forgot. North Carolina, I think that win against Dayton, that was more of an almost embarrassment for North Carolina, because they were a big, like, double-digit favorite in that game. So I think they're going to come into this game as a little bit more of the embarrassed team in this one, even though they do have Alabama up next. I think this game a little bit more meaningful to North Carolina. The problem that I have with that side is that Auburn definitely plays the better defense, and Auburn's up from 4 to 4.5, 67% of tickets and 95% of the cash on Auburn. So if Auburn is not going to be in a hangover spot, and Auburn's not going to overlook North Carolina, so the hangover spot from that big win might not matter as much. So it might be a situation where it's going to be just a game where both teams show up because it's a huge game, and then the better defense would win out, which is Auburn. So do I still lean that way? Maybe, because the market is kind of the clinching, like kind of the decider here when there are factors going in both directions here. I kind of tend to use the market as kind of the deciding factor, and that would put you on Auburn in this game. But the situation does seem like it would slightly lean to North Carolina, but again, I mean, the money looks like it is coming in on Auburn, so I guess that would be the way I would lean there. Yeah, fondle the Dukies. Let's move over to NHL, where I don't have any plays in NHL, but I guess I'll talk about it quickly here. But there's not a whole lot to say about NHL here. We only have 2 games, Vancouver at Boston and Utah at Montreal. I don't even know what to say about this. Boston's down from -145 to -114, so I don't really have a situational read on this at all, but the market read looks like it is, like the money is coming in on Vancouver against a public Boston team. How is Boston public against Vancouver? I don't know. 64% of the tickets and cash on Boston. I mean, Boston has been the team that's looked worse than Vancouver this year, and they probably are the worst team. So Boston opened, the odds makers are telling you on that opening price that Boston is actually the slightly better team, but that line has shifted to a point where the market is now telling you that Vancouver is a slightly better team, and I think that is probably accurate. I'm not going to play it, obviously. Utah, I was closer to maybe fading Utah here, but I just don't want to do it. But Utah, I mean, they're finishing a road trip, which is not an easy spot, although they might want to even up the road trip because they're 1-2 on the road trip right now. But that was a pretty tough game against Toronto, and this is a third game in 4 days and a fourth game in 6 days, all in different cities. Pretty tough opponent in Toronto there. Now they get a Montreal team that's pretty easy to overlook, and they do have Edmonton up once they get home, and then Vegas. So it is a sandwich spot that Utah is in, and a bad rest spot for Utah. So am I convincing myself to play on the Canadiens now because I'm looking at this further? I don't know. I mean, the Canadiens had beaten Edmonton, and then they just couldn't keep up that amount of effort and lost to Vegas 6-2. So kind of an ugly loss there from Montreal, even though it was against a good opponent in Vegas. Now they've had 2 days off, and they're not traveling, and they don't have anything big in their next game, at least against Columbus. So Montreal, they're in a much better rest spot, a much better travel spot. I mean, they might be able to be in like a bounce back spot here. Oh, man. I think I'm going to convince myself to play on Montreal in this one too, man. Utah's down from -135 to -128. 71% of the tickets and 97% of the cash on Montreal in this one. So the cash percentage is coming in on Montreal here. Let me just take a look at this real quick. Am I adding another play? I might add 2 plays on the fly here, right on the spot here. I mean, I don't want to ruin my hockey, which has been awesome recently, but let's see what we got here. Montreal Canadiens +115 on the money line. Yeah, fuck it. We're adding another one. Let's do it. Montreal +115. I'm a degenerate now, man. I can't help myself. I think I'm, I think that I am, being selective here, man. But give me Montreal +115. I'll add it to the slate. I hope these extra plays don't hurt me here, but I'm feeling good right now. I'm feeling fine. Let's go to NBA here. I got 2 plays in the NBA, and I don't even think I'm going to comment on the other games in the NBA. It's not really a whole lot of interest here in these other games. Let's just go right to my 2 plays here. First play up is Houston plus the points, +3.5. Give me the Houston Rockets. I like this spot. T-Wolves are down from 4.5 to 3.5. 56% of the tickets are with juice, though, so maybe you can find 4s out there still. 56% of the tickets, 64% of the cash on the T-Wolves as it stands right now. They do have the cash percentage, but I don't expect that to continue. Minnesota's in a bad spot, man, in my opinion. They're returning home from a road trip, even though I know it was only a 2-game road trip, and they did badly on the road trip. And Houston's been playing well, so will they be focused? I don't know about that, man, because when you return home, again, you still have family life to get back to. I mean, they still have been away for 5 days, so that's not nothing. And you still, that home life return can kind of distract you. You have stuff to take care of at home. But look at what Minnesota just did in their last game, man. They played Boston, the returning champs, at Boston. Boston was blowing them out of the building, my Boston Celtics. And Minnesota made a furious comeback, came all the way back and stayed in this game and made it a 1-score game in the final minute. And the Celtics had to hold off that insane comeback from Minnesota. If you're Minnesota, how do you pull yourself back up off the mat after that, man? Massive effort, and you almost did that. I don't really see it here, man. And on the other side, Houston's in a good bounce back spot. I understand Houston does have the better record, so it's not like Minnesota can really be unfocused here. But look at Houston's schedule, man. They lost to Portland in their last game, and I explained that I thought Portland might bounce back because that was a zigzag spot where Houston had just destroyed Portland the night before that, and they were playing Portland again the next night with Minnesota coming up next. It's like, how can you really be excited to play Portland again, the team that you just dominated? Portland was the team that had all the adjustments to make. They caught Minnesota there, and now, they caught Houston there. Houston, not Minnesota, Houston. And now Houston has 2 days off to try to get over that, and they're starting a 2-game road trip. And when you start a road trip, that's usually a focus spot, like I said, and it's going to be a focus spot when it's the Minnesota T-Wolves, man. One of the better teams in the Western Conference, one of the big playoff teams from last year. Houston's this up-and-coming team. I think Houston's going to be focused. I think they're in a bounce-back spot after that ugly, explainable bad performance against Portland. Give me the points for the Houston Rockets in that game. What's up, Will? Thank you, sir. Utah is on the struggle bus. They're a bunch of retarded kids, basically. I don't know, man, on the short bus. Utah, I mean, they're still the Arizona Coyotes from last year, and I think Utah, as I mentioned in their last game, by the way, I thought Ingram was going to be a net in their last game because Vejmelka had played a bunch of games in a row, but it was Vejmelka again. So I think it is going to be Ingram this time, and he's been the worst of their two goalies. So again, for Utah, you're either going to get Ingram, who hasn't been playing that well, or you're going to get a tired Vejmelka in there as far as their goalie is concerned. So, and then my other play in basketball in the NBA is the Utah Jazz plus 2.5. Give me the Jazz, even though I know I believe I played Utah against San Antonio last time, didn't I? I think I did, and I got caught in this game, but I'm going right back to this and doing it again. San Antonio has actually faced Utah twice already, both at home, and they lost one of those games. So that might have been the one reason why San Antonio may have still showed up in any way against Utah in this next game against Utah. Maybe just because Utah had beaten them at home earlier in the month, because that game, I faded San Antonio, man. I mean, they were coming off playing Lakers, Dallas, and then they beat Oklahoma City, and then they had Golden State up next. I thought that was a bad sandwich spot, man, for San Antonio, and they were without Wemba. They had been without Wemba since either this LA game or the Dallas game. I forget. So Wemba was out. He was injured. So I was like, okay, let's play Utah here. And Utah was winning most of this game, man. I thought I had it. Utah had a big lead in this game, and unfortunately, San Antonio came all the way back and actually covered the number, and Utah didn't even cover as an underdog. Utah was a 3.5-point underdog, by the way, on the road at San Antonio, and now San Antonio's laying 2.5 at Utah. So I mean the odds are just kind of weird in this game, but it's because Wemba is back in this game though. So I think that has something to do with it as well. So I don't know. I mean, you could try to figure out what those odds mean. I mean, if Wemba was playing in that game against Utah, it probably would have been like 4.5, 5, and then this line starts kind of making more sense. So the line actually isn't really too high as far as 2.5. I think it's about right. So San Antonio, look at what they're coming off of now, man. Wemba came back in this game against Golden State. So you might think, well, that means it's the reverse injured player theory spot, right? When your star player comes back, you tend to play a little bit worse, right? Yeah, but not if you're playing the Golden State Warriors. Like, even though he's coming back, you're going to focus on the Golden State Warriors. And they beat the Warriors. I mean, that's a huge win for this San Antonio team. It looks like they're a little bit up and coming here, man. The Warriors shot terribly from the field. 37.9%. That's not something that's really that sustainable. Now San Antonio gets this Utah team they just beat. It's a one-game trip where they have to go out into elevation and play Utah. And then what do they have to do? They have to come back to Texas and play LeBron and the Lakers tomorrow. So I don't think they're going to take Utah seriously, man. Even though Utah was beating them in that last game, they still beat Utah. They're coming up beating Golden State. At some point, they have to have a down game, man. And it's got to be this one weird trip out into elevation. And by the way, they did play at Utah as well, and they beat Utah on the road already this year too. So actually, they're 2-1 against Utah this year, and they're 1-0 with a blowout win. Their win by margin, by the biggest margin, was the one at Utah. So Utah might be a little bit extra pissed about that, and San Antonio might just figure, well, it'll be easy again, whatever. They have this game surrounded by bigger things, man. LA is a much bigger opponent. Golden State is a much bigger opponent. I think it's a sandwich spot here. It's a letdown spot and a look-ahead spot, and they have 2 days off. And that 2 days off might actually hurt their momentum, man, because when you're playing well like this and you're beating good teams, you don't want to stall out your momentum like this. So, and it's not a road trip. It's just a single road game. So it's not like you want to get the road trip off to a good start when it's only one game. You just kind of, you tend to maybe not have as much focus in a game like this. So give me Utah for that reason as well. I'm going to fade San Antonio. And then on the other side for Utah, yeah, they just beat the Knicks and blew them out. So, okay, that's a huge win. Does that mean they're going to be in a letdown spot? I don't really think teams like this can really be in that much of a letdown spot. When you have any decent team coming into your place, I think you're going to still be focused, especially when you just lost to that team. So I think all that Knicks win is going to do is break Utah's losing momentum. So I like that. And they also have 2 days off and they're not traveling, but I don't think they really have any momentum to stop here because they only had one win, and that win stopped that loss streak that they were on. So I think they might be able to still bring focus into this one and they got that like monkey off their back, basically. Like, hey, we won a game. We won a game against a pretty good opponent here. So maybe that'll help them. I think it kind of did after they beat Dallas, too. They played fairly well at Sacramento. Last time they beat San Antonio, they kind of played well in the next game, too, against Phoenix. So, I mean, yeah. So, take from all of that what you will, but I like the Jazz in that spot plus the points. And that is going to do it for my plays, but I will talk about college football briefly here. Not a whole lot to say about these college football games, man, but I mean, we have two MACtion games here. They are very uninteresting MACtion games. Toledo is at Akron in the first of the two games. They're both at the same time. Toledo's down from 9 to 8, but they have 64% of the cash, 67% of the tickets on the other side. So the public is actually coming in on the Akron side for some inexplicable reason. Toledo is obviously the better team, but public maybe thinks Akron's offense might be better. I don't really see it. I don't understand it really. Total's up from 49 to 49 with juice on the over. 64% of the tickets and 90% of the cash, both on the over. So it looks like some money has come in the over. In this one, I don't really know what I think about the total in this game or the side, to be honest. I mean, Toledo, they can't make the MAC championship. They have 3 losses, so that was one of their goals. That's over. They can't do it. They're already bowl eligible. They have 7 wins now, so I don't think that they really don't have much of a reason to show up in this game, man. They're already going to be in some bowl. I mean, that's pretty much it. They lost to Ohio in their final home game. That was their big senior day game against an Ohio rival. They lost the game. So, like, are they really going to focus on Akron here? And this, I don't really see it. And Akron, it's their senior day, man. It's their final home game. It is a game against a big brother in the state of Ohio, really, because Akron's just been a much worse team recently, so they might have reason to come and show up focused in this game. And they're hosting a game on ESPN2, which they don't do that often. So I think Akron has more reason to show up, and they're at least coming off a win against Kent State, even though Kent State is far and away the worst team in the MAC. They might be the worst team in all of FBS. Kent State is so bad, and lucky for us, we get to see them play tonight, too. So Akron, at least that win against Kent State might kind of halt that like losing momentum that they had. So situationally, I would actually lean to taking the points with Akron. The problem is, I mean, Akron, I just don't know, man. I mean, Toledo can still throw the ball a bit, and Akron can't stop the pass. So, on paper, it looks like Toledo should win this game pretty easily. But the problem is, Toledo really doesn't have a whole lot of motivation in this game, from what I can tell. And Akron does kind of have reason to show up in this game. So, the motivational standpoint would have me leaning to taking the points with Akron here. But I'm not going to do it. And as far as the total is concerned, I just really don't have a gauge on it. The total looks a little bit low, and maybe it's undervaluing Akron's offense just a little bit. Because this Akron offense with Finley at QB, I mean, he hasn't been that bad. Simmons has put up some decent rushing numbers as well. So this Akron offense, it's not like they're completely miserable. So I don't know. Toledo's defense is the better defense, though. But again, if you have a good you can have a good defense, but if you don't really care about the game, I mean, it's not going to matter as much. So I might agree to towards the over in that one too, but I'm not going to touch it. The other game is Kent State against Buffalo. Buffalo's up from 21.5 to 23.5 with juice. 96% of the tickets and only 93% of the cash. The public doesn't even care that this number is out of control big. They just don't want anything to do with Kent. Kent State has been awful this year. As I said, just they can't do much of anything. Kent is down from 50 to 49, or total, is down from 50 to 49.5 juice to the over. 73% of the tickets and cash, both on the over. This is, I don't know what to think about the total. There isn't even really a market read to be had on the total here. As far as what this game means, I mean, Kent State, are they going to show up and try to win a game so they don't go winless on the season? Maybe. I mean, that's what they have to play for, but they are just real bad. I mean, they are so bad that I don't even know if this line is like not justified here. I don't know, man, because Buffalo is obviously the better team. Their offense has been playing better with Ogbonna. Is that their quarterback's name? He could throw the ball. He's a deep thrower. I mean, they got a decent rushing attack as well with Henderson in there. So this Buffalo offense has been good, but granted, their best offensive performances were against Western Michigan, who plays no defense, Akron, who's just bad all around. Ball State, also pretty bad, especially defensively, they're bad. And Eastern Michigan is bad, and Eastern Michigan had 3 turnovers in that game. So Buffalo, I mean, yeah, their offense has been playing well, but of course, Kent State is even worse than all of those teams. So it's not like Buffalo's not going to be able to score against Kent State. Of course they are. I mean, Buffalo's offense is more than capable of lighting up Kent State. So that may be the case here. Kent State probably not going to be able to score a whole lot in this game, even though Buffalo's defense isn't exactly great. Kent State is just a very incapable team in general. And then motivationally, here's where the weird scenario comes in. Buffalo's sitting at 5-2, and they have according to some of these probability makers, they have about a 0.4% chance of making the MAC championship game still. So they actually still can make the MAC championship. So, and it's final home game for them, senior night on ESPN or whatever. So, or is this televised? It must be, right? It's on ESPN Plus, actually. So it's not even on one of the TV channels. The TV doesn't even want to show you Kent State. So maybe the TV factor won't motivate them as much because it's not on one of the big TV stations, but still, they actually have a weird, extremely outside chance to make the MAC title game. The odds makers are putting it at 6,000, plus 6,000 are their chances to make the MAC championship. And what they need to do to make the MAC championship is as follows. They need to win this game, obviously, against Kent State, but pretty sure that's going to happen. They need Miami, Ohio to beat Bowling Green, because Miami, Ohio is facing Bowling Green in the final week here, this week. So, I mean, that's doable, of course. That's going to be a close game there. That's a competitive game. Miami, Ohio needs to beat Bowling Green so they would stay ahead of Bowling Green in the standings and knock Bowling Green down to a tie with Buffalo. And Buffalo, I believe, would have the tiebreaker against Bowling Green. Buffalo would also need Ohio to get knocked out, because obviously that would mean Miami, Ohio is in. Buffalo would need to somehow get above Ohio. So they need Ohio to lose to Ball State at home. That's probably not going to happen, because Ohio still is going to need to win that game to make the MAC championship. Ohio's going to be a double-digit favorite against Ball State. So sorry, Buffalo. I mean, that's probably where we run into the problem. Ohio is going to beat Ball State. And if that's not bad enough, for some reason, I don't know how these tiebreakers work, but apparently these 4-3 teams, Western Michigan needs to lose to, I think, who are they playing? I forget who they're playing. They need to lose to Eastern Michigan at home, and Western Michigan is going to be about a touchdown favorite in that game, so that's probably not going to happen. But I think if Western Michigan wins, but if Buffalo wins, Western Michigan would still be behind them, so I don't quite understand why that's part of the scenario. And I saw part of the scenario being that they need Central Michigan to lose as well, which can happen. I think they're on the road at Northern Illinois, so I mean, that's more likely. I mean, Northern Illinois probably can beat Central Michigan at home if they actually want to show up in any way. So I don't get why those are part of the scenario. It seems like it would just be the Ohio, Miami, and Bowling Green part of the scenario that really matters here for Buffalo. So I don't totally understand the rest of it there, but there's long story short, even though I gave you the long story, there's a very weird outside chance that Buffalo makes the MAC championship, although it's not going to happen. But so I don't know. Are they going to be a little bit more motivated for that reason? I'm not really sure. Maybe they just know that they're not going to be in, but maybe just for that ridiculous outside chance, maybe they will show up in this game. I mean, I expect them to win regardless, because Kent State is just that bad, but will they cover this massive number? I don't know. That's going to do it for me, man. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Nate, Will, thanks for being in the chat, guys. My plays once again today in college basketball, Michigan State money line -111, or if you want to lay 1.5, I would not disagree with that either. Duke -3, I think is where it is sitting now. I'll have to figure out what the best number is. And Duquesne, I'm playing Duke and the Dukes. Duquesne -7.5, very misleading number there. In NBA, Houston Rockets +3.5, Utah Jazz +2.5, and hockey, because I can't help myself with these extra plays with Duquesne, and this one, Montreal Canadiens +115 on the money line. Let's get it. Let's have another winning day, man. 3 out of the last 4. I want to end the year hot. I'm sitting right now with a winning year with a decent amount of padding, so let's keep it up, baby. Let's do it. Thanks for hanging out. I'm Tower Gang Toad. Follow the Tower Gang podcast, patreon.com/Tower Gang. And you can get live pre-show, post-show, bonus content, hang out with us in a Telegram, etc. We're going to be on tomorrow night with a Thanksgiving episode, probably, somewhat, sort of Tower Gang, where maybe we'll give thanks. We did that last year. We talked about what we were thankful for a little bit. Gets a little bit gay on Tower Gang, gayer than usual even. So go check that out. And we are switching our stuff over to different audio and video platforms, though, so you'll still be able to find the video on Rumble. We're going to almost be exclusively Rumble, but the live video will still be on YouTube as well. And we're going to be on all the audio platforms as well, just through a different mechanism. So that's going to do it for me. Like I said, peace out, guys. Let's have a good day today. Peace.